Welcome to Tailboard Talk, a fourth shift fitcast. The mission of Tailboard Talk and the fourth shift fitness is to educate and train fire service personnel to increase durability and decrease the potential for injuries and their associated costs. My name is Chris Morella, owner and founder of Fourth Shift Fitness. I'll use my experience as a personal trainer, strength coach, and 15-year veteran of the fire service to deliver tips, tricks, lessons, and information specifically geared towards the health and wellness of firefighters and paramedics. Each episode, you'll leave with immediate deliverables that will improve performance and resilience and keep you in the fight through your career and into retirement. Let's get into it. Buy me and Curt a coffee.
Why are we buying coffees?
It's a donation button I have on the website now. I've made $24.
You know, there's a composer that I follow who decomposes like music, and his thing is always just decomposes. He calls it.
Really?
Yeah, he's a decomposer.
Did I send you that guy? The session guy? Bald guy with glasses? Oh, okay.
But basically he peels apart the engineering of songs and stuff. And it's really cool to listen to it from him. But he's always like, buy me a cup of coffee.
So it's a thing. Okay. It's a button.
Gotcha.
A company does it.
Mm-hmm.
They link to your Stripe account.
Okay.
And they give you the button that you can customize, say buy me a beer or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's in whatever dollar increments you want. So I pick 3 because it's like a common one. Mm-hmm. And then if you click the button, you go on and it says how many coffees do you want to buy, and then it's just multiples of whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so that's just a thing. And then it goes right to your Stripe account or whatever.
Interesting.
So another guy that does it, maybe I sent it to Rick, but he does the same thing where he takes all the tracks apart.
Yeah.
But he does it live and then he deletes it in 24 hours.
Oh.
So if you miss it, it's gone. So he's had and he's getting pretty, obviously he's very popular before, but now he's getting the artists noticing him.
Yeah.
And so Jimmy Eat World, their main guy was on, took him through in this part of the chorus and this part of this is how this was made. Uh-huh. And then he deletes it in 24 hours. It's gone.
That's cool.
And so it's a pretty cool exclusive thing.
Yeah.
That if you catch it, I caught a few, and it's really cool.
Is he doing it on YouTube?
Instagram.
And
they're long.
I wonder if it's on YouTube, because then you really get people to hit the subscribe button, which I guess obviously monetizes your channel somehow. But maybe you just get more subscribers that way, because now they know they need to be alerted because it's not going to be there forever.
Yeah, he might have it. I never really looked that far into him. It's one of those things that I think it's cool when you catch it.
Yeah.
But I don't it's not my thing.
Yeah.
I'm not like Rick buying vinyl and listening to music and stuff. So I never really looked that far into it, but I just thought it was cool. First I thought it was crazy. I'm like, why would this guy delete this stuff? Yeah. This is awesome. Mm-hmm. And then I saw how kind of rabid people were of seeking it out. The scarcity thing. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And he does a really good job too. He gets into it. He's not just doing it.
The ones that I can't understand, and some channels are just huge, just the reaction ones, watch me react to this song or watch me react to this Game of Thrones episode. It's people are just going to sit there and watch you, and you're going to monetize off
watch
of this?
you watch stuff.
Yeah. Just the same thing over and over again too.
We were watching something the other day on Netflix. And by the 3rd episode, I was like, oh, these people just do the same thing every time. Mm-hmm. It was like an organizational show or something.
Okay.
Where they go into these disasters of houses and fix something.
Yeah.
And by the 3rd one, they're like, oh, they're bringing the same boxes and the same hangers in every time and doing the same exact thing to every single. Mm-hmm. I get it. Yeah. And then you watch something else. You're not being creative.
Same thing with bar rescue. Here's these 3 things we're going to add to your dirty kitchen, and here's how you do a shaker.
Here's your new POS system. Let me scream at you. You're welcome. I think he's got to invest in those places.
I'm sure he does.
So I think he invests in them and then gets paid back that way.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just doing it for free.
No.
John Taffer. Okay. In other news, I think I'm going to talk to you for one of these weeks too. Spring for Change is coming up. Do you remember that from last year? Mm-hmm. So Annette and I are changing it. We're just going to do every Friday now. So there's 5 Fridays in April. Fridays are the Spring for Change days. And then we're just going to split it up over the 4 subjects. So the first one's going to be an intro coverall. Mm-hmm. And then it'll be the 4 pillars of Spring for Change. But just a Friday because there's just too much.
Yeah.
And then the cool thing is this comes out on Wednesdays, so then Wednesday we can talk about the upcoming topic and then repost it all week long with the Friday launch. So I'll probably hit you up for at least one of them during the fitness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But you get a break until then. We have a couple episodes to do before that. And then there's the Buy Me the Coffee button. If I don't edit it out, we just talked about that. But you can buy Curt and I a coffee. It's on the website under the recent episode page or the all episodes page. Click on that thing, and then if you like what we're talking about or doing, listen, just it's a cool little pat on the back. So appreciate it if you do it. If not, no big deal. This will never not be free, but it's just something you can do to say, hey, thanks for this stuff. Today, though, we're going to talk about something that Curt is very familiar with. Built an empire off of it. In fact, he was just training the new guys at work how to do it this morning, so it's especially fresh in his brain. We're going to talk about program design and kind of the basics of how to put together a workout, what we do when we program for clients and ourselves, and kind of wherever else we spin off on this thing. We have about 25 minutes to talk about it till Nathan gets back from swim class. So
time cap, huh?
We'll jam
maybe we'll get through warm-ups and that'll be
jam a few decades of knowledge. We'll talk about the great toe for 15 minutes.
Right.
So take it away, Curt. Where do you go first with talking to people about building a workout?
Usually what I do is I give my disclaimer of you should invest in yourself somehow, no matter what, each day. And so my program design lecture that I give people is typically for it. You have an hour or so to work out, but obviously you can pull that apart a little bit if you have 20 minutes or you're just not feeling it that day. And I think we've covered that previously. It's like there are some days that you don't feel it, and so that might be a day you just go for a walk or you just do some, stretching on the floor and just something to kind of purposely move around, but it's better than nothing type of thing. And then we talked about we have some days where maybe we only have 30 minutes, you're feeling it, but Nathan's coming home from swimming or whatever it ends up being, and you just got to get something done. So maybe you cut down parts of your 60-minute workout in order to get something done because you're feeling good. But then the main part that I'm going to talk about is just how I design programs, either for myself or for somebody else. And these are looking at mostly like 60-minute sessions. And obviously, with 25 minutes, this will be kind of a broad stroke of everything, and we can get into things in further detail. But typically, I start everything with a warm-up. The warm-up is going to be 10 to 12 minutes. And kind of like we talked about before, warm-ups for me, starts ground-based. We're going to work on joint mobility to start, kind of segments at a time. So we're looking at moving our ankles, we're looking at moving our hips, we're looking at moving our shoulders, our neck. And then you start making it a little bit more dynamic, getting up and moving multi-joints and traveling a little bit. These are your like moving knee hugs, walking lunges, stuff like that. And then you increase your heart rate and your tissue temperature a little bit with some jumping jacks or, shuttles or something along those lines. And, that's all a 10 to 12 minute process typically. And you can take a little bit more if you need to, but any more than that, and you're starting to take away some of the usable energy you have for your workout that you're doing. So if you're sitting there for 30 minutes warming up and you've done this like high heart rate thing, you've just started working out. That's not the warm up anymore. And the other thing is static stretching. We've talked about static stretching as our sit and hold for, 20, 30 seconds type thing. The hurdler stretch, you sit down and reach for your toe. No problem with static stretching. It's kind of shown to be proven to be a net neutral in terms of preparing for a workout. So it's not going to hinder you, but it's not going to help you either. Whereas the dynamic stuff that we talked about is going to be a better use of your time to prepare yourself for a workout. So if you are someone who likes to static stretch and you have more time, you can do that before your dynamic warm-up, or do it at the end of your workout where you're trying to cool down and shut your CNS down a little bit.
Hold on, two things.
Yep. Uh-huh.
First,
25 minutes already?
No, I don't mean to derail this entire conversation, but I'm looking at your coffee cup right now.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your name.
Obviously, I didn't
your name
scan.
On your coffee.
You're the second person who said this today. I bought Jamie a coffee today, and she's like, "What is this?" She's like, "Do you usually get this?" I'm like, "I get the K pretty frequently, but the I is a tough one."
Kurt's the Starbucks cup his name is Curt, and it's spelled Kirt.
Close.
Got my
Yep.
Got my. Anyways,
there we go.
Yeah, turn that thing away. Oh, God, dude. So I have a couple of rules written down here that when I talk to the new guys, I try to break it down for them, which you just did. Start from the ground up, which is usually like, we'll start on the ground. So quadruped position or a push-up position doing calf stretch, something like that, but you're on the ground. Or even side lying or on your back or whatever doing glute bridges. Then you work from the ankle up. And this is just ways I tell people to cleanly make a system in place. So if you're lost, you're like, oh, I'm at my hip now. I can move up to my T-spine. And then you start from single joints to multi-joint movements. So I think like first we're doing the push-up position calf stretch. So you're just basically bending at the ankle joint and stretching out your calf. And then later we're going to do our reverse lunge in place, which involves a lot more joints. And then moving from low intensity to high intensity. So just like Curt said, we'll start with a push-up position calf stretch again, and eventually you're going to be sprinting across the parking lot or in the field or across the turf or whatever. So low intensity to high intensity. So that's kind of the four things that the four guidelines I give to people for movement prep or warm-ups in general before we move on to the complexes.
Yeah. And when you create a system like that, then you can plug and play stuff. So like, it doesn't have to be, if you have a warm-up that you like and it works for you, do it. But like you can, once you know, okay, well, I'm doing ground-based hip stuff, like, okay, well, I got single leg glute bridges, double leg glute bridges, and, you can come over quadruped and do your hips with like a quadruped rocking or hip circles. And, I'm sure on your YouTube page, you got plenty of warm-up stuff. On the LGM Performance page, there's a couple playlists. One's like a pillar prep, which kind of goes through the single joint stuff. And then there's a dynamic one that goes through some of the multi-joint stuff. So there's probably a couple hundred videos of warm-up stuff that you can sift through on either of those pages.
For sure.
But yeah, that's typically the way that I'll end up building the warm-up.
The other thing I'm guilty of this as much as anybody. When we work out at LGN, you guys would go through a good systematic warm-up that follows this scheme or something like it, and I would be disinterested.
You would not do that?
Nope. I would get on the Airdyne for 3 or 4 minutes and go from like playing on my phone, just using my legs, to then put the phone down, just use my arms, and then a couple intervals.
You would bully us into like, you would go start and we'd be like, I guess we got to go start now.
Well, then I'd grab like a kettlebell and swing it a few times and then I would do a couple of tester sprints, like, ooh, nothing exploded. All right. And then do a couple longer sprints. Right. And then, it's time to get going.
That is a good thing with the warm up too, is you get to see if your check engine light's going to come on. It's pretty good spot to figure that out.
Yeah. I've derailed and changed my entire workout before based on the warm up. Like, well, I guess my old left hip isn't working that well today. I guess we're not doing that one. And change an entire movement complex out of it. All right, so moving into the actual working sets then. There's going to be a couple. There's going to be at least 2 or 3 complexes. Right? How are you dividing those up?
So I separate things between upper body and lower body, and then correctives and pillar work. And keep in mind, this is just a cookie cutter thing. This is not like a strength building. We're going to work on only back squats. This isn't a percentage-based Olympic lifting thing. This is just a typical, functional or whatever you want to call it.
The GPP
workout.
Right?
Yeah. So I'll look at it and I look at, upper body, we've discussed this before. We have push and pull, and we can do those in a horizontal and vertical manner. And so, upper body push in a horizontal is our bench press and push-ups. Upper body pull in a horizontal is our inverted rows or any type of rowing, bent over dumbbell rows, cable machine rows. And then vertical push is our military press overhead, kipping handstand push-ups.
Perfect.
Yep. And then our upper body pulls is our pull-ups. Vertical is pull-ups or pull-downs. And so I look at those, and some sort of upper body is going to be incorporated in a complex. And my complexes usually are 3 to 4 movements. I'll back up a little bit. They're 3 to 4 movements. Right now, I'm kind of into a phase where I like to give myself a time. So I'm going to do these 3 to 4 movements for 15 minutes. That doesn't mean that I'm trying to accomplish as much as I can in 15 minutes. It just means that sometimes when I say I'm going to do 3 rounds, and let's say I'm back squatting, my first round of back squatting is not a complete round. That's a 50%er, So this, if I do a 15 minutes, this maybe lets me squeak in a fourth set of back squats at the end or a fifth set where I've actually done the work versus a 60% one. So it's definitely not an AMRAP. It's not a try and do as much as I can. It's not a try and get my heart rate up. It's just giving me enough time to get enough sets in.
Well, a lot of times we've talked about parallel thinking a lot of like, we'll start programming something and then we'll see that Raf's doing it without ever talking to him. This is another case of that. This most recent month of programming for my clients, I've alternated between rep schemes and like a 12 to 15 minute timer just because I was like, we'll try this.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, so it's just a funny coincidence, but when it comes down to it, well, I think we've noticed is 3 to 4 actual good working sets takes about 15 minutes. And if you just need a different look at your program, or if you're just tired of doing 3 to 5 sets of something because you fall into like, oh, the first one's kind of a warm up and the second one I'm getting there. I guess I'm 2 in, so I have 2 more to go, blah, blah, blah. If you do your couple warm up sets and then set a 12-minute timer, you'll find that you get your 3 to 4 sets in.
Right.
And it's actually good work. So if nothing else, it's a good way to hack yourself, because I've certainly done that before where I'll get lazy doing deadlifts and then I'll set like a 9-minute timer and I'll end up getting 3 good sets of deadlifts in and be like, oh, that felt better than just setting out for 3 sets. Because let's be honest, those 3 sets could take you 27 minutes if you're just dicking around and walk away from the bar and come back and then don't feel good. And so it's a good way to get good, purposeful work in a shorter amount of time. That's going to be the same net product anyways when it's all said and done.
Yep. And like you said before, we both kind of operate on a perceived exertion as to how you're feeling that day. I'm kind of a big fan right now of giving a rep range with some of the stuff. So I might say we're going to do 8 to 10. Let's say we'll do bench press. We're doing 8 to 10 because then it's an easy cue of going, okay, well, if you got 10, you can add weight to the bar.
Yeah.
If you got 8, you're probably at a good place. So that kind of lets people self-scale, versus, having to give them specifics. Or what people typically do is they go, all right, that was good. And then they never add to it. So it gives them some built-in, accountability to move up if they need to, or a check mark to go, I did 10. I can add a little bit more weight.
Yeah.
So, in the first complex, like I'm probably adding 3 to 4 movements. Whatever the big boy movement is for that's not going to get repeated, that movement pattern, for the rest of the day, and maybe not even for the rest of the week. Rows most likely are going to get repeated, but if we bench press, barbell bench press, we're not coming back to another barbell bench press that week. We might have a variation, an offset, or we might go to dumbbells or something like that, but that's going to be it for that week.
Let's just real quick, because I meant to cut you off earlier. One of the things that Curt said with the horizontal and vertical presses and pulls, this sounds fundamental, but if you listen to those movements and you're like, I don't get it, because in a bench press, the weight is moving up towards the ceiling. And also in an overhead press, it's moving up towards the ceiling. How are those two different? You have to look at the weight in relation to where your body is and how it's moving. So it's moving perpendicular to your body. That's a horizontal movement pattern. If you were standing upright and putting your arms out in front of you like a zombie, your arms are moving in a horizontal pattern. So if you're on your back, it's the same pattern, you're just on your back. So don't worry about necessarily which direction the weight is moving. Look at how the weight is moving in relation to your body. So that's why bench press is horizontal, and then overhead press is a vertical. Same thing with rows. Pull-up is a vertical pull, as opposed to like a ring row would be a horizontal pull. So it's in relation to the angle of your body is what those are talking about.
And don't get caught up with like, well, I set a bench at an incline, so is that a vertical or horizontal? Like, that's just an upper body push at that point. Yeah. So that, like the big boy movement, and that's like, back squats, anything with a barbell for the most, where you're able to load up to like a, 8 intensity, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 intensity. Those ones aren't getting repeated throughout the week. So I'll partner that up with most likely something lower body. So that might be a lunge, a dumbbell lunge, and then, something else, whether it's a corrective or whether it's a sprint or whether it's a pillar movement. Third movement gets locked in there. And then you have your 3 movements that you kind of cycle through. And kind of a common question I get from the new guys is like, how much rest do you give? And some of that rest is built in there already, So if you're doing bench press and a barbell, and then you're going to go do some lunges, and then you're going to do, a corrective exercise, hip stretch or something like that. And then you're going to go put more weight on the bar. I mean, you've given yourself the rest that you need.
Right.
And then I just tell people, like, at that point, if you're ready to lift, and if you're not ready to lift, wait. It's
right.
just it's pretty easy at that point. There's no, you don't got to harp on a number or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, so then we continue on that for whatever time cap you set for yourself, and then we'll kind of wipe the whiteboard off and do kind of the same thing for the second complex. And again, so now since we've done maybe say we did a bench press in the first one, I definitely want to get some rows in there at that point. And rowing's one of the kind of movements that I personally don't think you can have too much of in your program. My guess is if you think you have enough, you still don't have enough, and you really can overdo it. And so it might be, dumbbell rows, at that point, and we might go some single leg RDLs or even a barbell RDL with a higher rep range, since we did lunges in the first one, get some backside muscles going. And then again, you can do a sprint, you can do some sort of pillar work or some sort of mobility work. And then you have another set of 3 movements that you cycle through for 15 minutes. And then from there, we get to a finisher. I kind of have 2 types of finishers. So for me, I either have basically like an AMRAP format where we say we're going to work at a pretty moderately high intensity for 4 to 6 minutes, 8 minutes maybe, and we're going to get uncomfortable, but not necessarily to failure on anything. We're going to get some burn out of it, and we're going to get some high heart rate.
Yeah.
But if I say we're going to do, 4 minutes of, 10 push-ups, 10 kettlebell swings, 10 bodyweight squats or something like that, we're not looking to get to a point where it's like, man, I need to walk around for 30 seconds before I can do this next thing. Right. Or I can only do 5 squats at a time, and then I got to shake my legs out. So it should be manageable enough that you can mostly keep moving. Maybe you got to grab a sip of water after a round is fine, but mostly for 4 to 8 minutes, you can keep moving. My other format would be just this is kind of like a pump at the end where it's we're going to do 20 seconds of bicep curls into 20 seconds of tricep press downs into 20 seconds of mountain climbers. And then, we're kind of redlining that with a little bit of rest and then, maybe 3 cycles of that. So now you've got 3 minutes broken into 20-second segments of high intensity work. And that's where you're getting the burn, and the pump at the end. So depending on what I've done earlier in the sessions, those finishers are kind of interchangeable, but, or depending on just how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah. And it's funny too, cause that might sound underwhelming of the finisher is just going to be bicep curls and an upper body kind of isolation thing. But the context gets lost really easily. Even when we were coaching, people were like, we're just going to do band work for our finisher for 4 minutes. What's the big deal about that? Yeah. That's where the well-rounded program comes into play, though, because by the time you get to that, you might be like, I don't want to do any more sprints, or my legs are very tired from doing heavy lunges or whatever else. And you're like, yeah, I'll just do an arm finisher for 4 minutes and go home. Thanks. Yeah. And it's also day to day. If you look at that finisher or that workout and think great, we're just going to do heavy bench press and then some RDL, single leg RDLs for higher reps, and then some arm finishers. That's not really what I'm looking for, Right. But the next day you come back, it might be just a good amount of turf work and some heavy back squats. Then now you're a completely different look, but it's following the same principles you laid out here of hitting all these movement patterns and kind of segmenting up in those different complexes. And that's the play, is the long game. It's not going to be, 2 workouts a week that are sparsely populated with stuff that you like, and that's it. Right. We're talking about a 3 to 4 time a week lifting program that's kind of incorporating everything. And I do remember that was one of the bigger worries with new people coming into classes. We're like, man, this is a really good workout for the week, but this is a really bad workout for a new person to come and hang out in.
Yeah, we just left.
Can you come back tomorrow, please?
The other day, it's we had a day like that. Yeah, and you talk about the long game, and that's really what this is. And we've talked about this before of your joint, works on your body works on an alternating mobile and stable joint system. And if you have lack of mobility or lack of stability in certain joints, then chances are that's a potential injury waiting to happen. And when you look at kind of what we've talked about here and checking all these boxes, you're now using the weight room as an opportunity to set new default movement patterns for when you go out onto the fire ground or you go out onto the court or wherever you are. And hopefully you've built yourself into a place where you've improved that mobile and stable joint system to reduce the probability of an injury at that point, which is really the whole reason for us that we do this thing.
Right.
So yeah, so once you put all that together, then if you're doing it appropriately, you can't help but improve that system.
Yeah. One thing we didn't touch on specifically, but I think is a major player in both our programs is either unilateral or single-sided work or frontal plane work. What would you say you program compared to like a deadlift, traditional bench press, traditional back squat? How many times did you program those specific movements compared to like a lunge, a stagger stance deadlift or something like that, a single arm push press? Mm-hmm. What's kind of the ratio that you look to? Because I program far more single-sided work than I do traditional work.
Yeah, I'm way more unilateral than traditional.
That's the biggest carryover we're going to see, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, how often do you program just regular deadlifts or bench press?
I mean, we'll go whole 12-week cycles without doing some of those. Like we don't have, so this current 12-week cycle in, we do not have a traditional deadlift at all. We do have a barbell bench press in 3 of the 4 weeks, and we have a traditional back squat in 2 of the 4 weeks.
Okay.
So they're in there, but the rest of it is, and there's other traditional movements in there. We have a traditional push press in there this time. But we got, there's a ton of landmine work, ton of dumbbell work, Yeah. But I also do it, we do it that way too. I do it by nature because equipment too, and so it's unilateral stuff with dumbbells obviously is easier to program in a group setting. But I think we've talked about it too. Like, I like that stuff better. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love back squatting and front squatting and whatnot, but I love heavy single dumbbell front rack lunges or heavy single dumbbell rotational bear complexes much more than I love back squats, And so, and maybe it's just cause, you and I are at this point where we're 20 years into this and it's like traditional back squat. We've done a lot of them, and so it's like, it's nice. We just have that itch that we have to scratch where we need to do other stuff, and I don't know if that's just a squirrel type thing, but,
I mean, I don't know. I like doing that stuff. Like, I got back into deadlifting more frequently recently and it's fun.
Yeah.
And it definitely scratches an itch of like feeling strong from time to time or getting more technical with the lift. Mm-hmm. As strange as it sounds though, now that I'm saying it out loud, I think there's a portion of those other complexes, the rotational bear complex or just even that front rack forward moving lunge, where there's only so much technical aspect you can put into it and the rest of it's just heavy problem solving. Yeah. And so while you'd think like, man, that's a really complicated movement, you're going to have a 70-pound dumbbell at your shoulder on one shoulder while you lunge out with your left foot and then try to recover that, and especially if we're going reverse or any kind of off axis stuff, that seems like a very complicated movement. In reality, a traditional deadlift probably has about 7 or 8 more points of technical coaching in it than stepping out, trying not to get crushed like a diamond, and then standing back up again without tearing your pelvis in half. Yep. So I think it's a seemingly complicated thing that when you get into is just really fundamental and just heavy and fun to problem solve on the fly. So maybe that's part of it is, you can just grab the 80-pound kettlebell and bring it up to chest level and see what you can do instead of having to worry about bracing the arch of your foot and spinning your shins out and locking your lats down and breathing at the right time. And maybe that's it, but I definitely do gravitate towards those things. What are we doing for, we've talked about this before, but I think it's good to throw in there. There's the depending on who you talk to, the pillars of movement, right? The push, pull, hinge, squat, rotate. And that last one, that rotate one can be like sprint, rotate, anti-rotate, core, plyo. That's kind of a catch-all segment. But going in with that unilateral training, what's a lot of your quote-unquote core work look like? Because that's an easy one that people fall back on. It's like, well, if I don't know what to do, I'm just going to do 100 sit-ups or whatever, planks for 5 minutes, Yeah.
And we're not absent of planks or lateral planks by any means at all. Those definitely are super important in incorporating the program. But we do a lot of pal-off presses. We do a lot of offset movements. So, if you're doing anything single dumbbell, like we just talked about, single dumbbell front rack, where you're holding a heavy dumbbell on your right shoulder and lunging forward, you can't help but use your core on that. A lot of medicine ball throws. a lot of atypical, plank moves. So like instead of doing a regular, plank or pillar where you're on your elbows and your toes and you're just holding, maybe lift one leg up and kick it out to the side an inch or two, so you're doing a single leg with a little bit of an offset on it, or come up to a push-up position and alternate tapping your opposite hand to your opposite shoulder. So you're kind of doing a single arm plank back and forth. So we vary that up, pretty significantly, but we do the holds, but like I said, there's also, some throws and stuff that go in there with medicine balls too. 0 sit-ups, we talked about that before. You won't find that in my program at all.
Yeah.
Not to say that if you're super long, skinny guy that you're not going to have an issue with it, but juice just ain't worth the squeeze on for most of us that are going to have a back issue anyways. Why not? Why compound it,
Yeah. So. Well, it's such an not easily. There's other ways too. You can coach, like abdominal contraction into like a curled position. You can do that with medicine ball throws, going from extension or overextension to just regular throwing. You're going to have a follow through there, but to squeeze through an end range of motion where you're contracted and kind of closed off like that. Yeah, we've learned that it can cause, more often than not, it'll cause more harm than good. So
and here's the thing, like, and our our pillar, it's a force transmitter, and so the end of the day, we're looking to use some ground reaction force into our extremities to create power somehow. And if that's breaching a door, if that's doing a sprint, if that's whatever that is, that's what we need to train. And sit-ups, repeated flexion and extension in that, it just doesn't transmit to what we're doing, And so if we're looking to create power and ventilate a roof with a hand tool, or, you're a fighter and you need to strike someone, sit-ups aren't your friend at that point. You need to build a stable core that can handle transmitting force from the ground to your extremities.
Yeah.
And pillars and planks and anti-rotation stuff is the way to do it. And sit-ups are cool for your six-pack.
So actually, as you're saying that, I had 2 stories pop in my head. Personal experience, of course. First one is from that fire we had, and we went home tired because we went through our 3 bottles, and it was just an extended scene. And I was like, man, we're going to be sore tomorrow. Like, regardless how much you work out, if you're working at that high of a pace. Yeah. And it was upstairs, and there was stuff everywhere. So we're moving hose lines around and pulling all the ceiling on the 2nd floor. I'm like, we're going to be sore. And I was with a pretty decent crew. Like, there was no real slack asses in that crew. And we woke up sore. We woke up like crunchy, And then you get moving and it loosened up and it was fine. But I noticed that my left hamstring and my right shoulder were just tight. Not painful or anything, like no injury. But I was like, man, I don't know what movement that was. Obviously, I was scooting around a lot, and I pulled an okay amount of hose and okay amount of ceiling, but I was kind of trying to stay loose in the supervisor role. Yeah. But a lot of moving, so I must have been in a position where I was constantly pulling with my left heel or driving off my left leg with my right knee on the ground and just kind of shuffling around. I was like, well, that's a perfect example of how we're going to work across your body, right? More than anything, you're not going to have. It'd be strange if both your quads were sore after a fire. Like, what happened there? Right. Yep. But for one hamstring and the opposite shoulder to be sore means like, oh, we're working across. Yep. We're asymmetrical at all times. Now, to go on the opposite side of that, we had food poisoning here a couple days ago, and I puked my guts out.
Felt that one too, right?
Both sides of my lower back were killing me. Both equally in the same spot, right below my kidneys, right above your belt line, screaming for like 2 days because I was wretched like a dog. I was like, well, there's a sit-up. Like, that's exactly. And I was like, oh, it's because I slept weird. And I was like, no. I shouldn't be this sore from sleeping because I slept for a long time, Then I was like, I think I sneezed or something. I was like, oh, oh man. Like, my abs were sore and the hip crest of my lower back was sore. I was like, oh, it's my sit-ups right there. It's 100 sit-ups compacted into 3.5 seconds of intense vomiting. Yep. So, I don't know. Take that for what it's worth. A little proof of the pudding there from experience standpoint. Anything you want to leave people with programming-wise? If they're, I mean, it can go off in so many directions, right? But, general tips for programming?
No, and I think it's just having a movement system versus an exercise system, and so when you have a movement system, there's no barriers, that you can do it with body weight, so if you're on vacation and, you have no access to equipment, you can still, push-ups are a horizontal push, skydivers are, a pull, body weight squats and lunges and some pillars, and you can get stuff done. And then you take it into a workout room at a hotel and you can add different movements for your pulls and your, your knee dominant stuff. So when you get away from all I can do is back squat or all I can do is this, and you look at it as a system that you can plug and play with, then all of a sudden the opportunities become endless, because you can change your positioning, you can change your tools that you're using, you can change, the load that's on it. And so systemize it. And that takes a little while, but versus exercises only.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. If you're looking at your program or the gym you go to and it conflicts with what you guys do, not even conflicts, but if you're like, man, we only do thrusters, back squats, hang power cleans, the typical CrossFit kind of everything down the train tracks, movement patterns. If you like it, good. You should like it. It can be a lot of fun, and I'm sure there's a lot of good that can come out of you doing it. If you approach your gym owner or coach or whoever and ask about these things, then they get a little hinky about it. Maybe that's a warning sign in general too. It depends on how you ask the question, I suppose. But if they're unwilling to talk about adjusting to be more single-sided or unilateral, maybe that's a little bit of a warning sign, because Curt and I can both tell you from experience that if you're not doing that stuff, you're at not a supreme disadvantage necessarily, but you're not giving yourself the best chance. So I'm not going to say you're worse off for it, but there might be a time when you need a little more strength in one plane or another, or pushing off one foot than another, and it might not be there, or you might just not be comfortable doing that stuff. So if your job is in fire or rescue or anything else tactical like that, quote unquote tactical, and you're only doing stuff where both hands and both feet are attached to the same thing and moving in one plane, I would encourage you to branch out a little bit. Look for a coach or look for a system that can translate better to your job. And besides that, if you're doing stuff, keep doing it. Hopefully no matter what you're doing is better than not. So don't look at it like, well, these guys are telling me to do all this stuff and I don't know how to do that. I'm going to stop what I'm doing now because it doesn't jive with it. Don't do that.
No, yeah, this is an opportunity to just maybe reflect on what you're doing, and maybe you just look at it and you go, I love what I do, but yeah, they're right, I don't row enough, and you just add some rows in somewhere. You know, it doesn't mean, I'm not saying this has to be a sweeping change.
No, don't make any broad sweeping changes. Those aren't the best. All right, if you guys need anything, don't be afraid to reach out. Like I said, if you like what we're talking about, go hit the Buy Me a Coffee button on the website. I'll link it, of course, and we'll talk to you guys soon.